Greetings and salutations, comrades. Hope this finds you well. So I came across this article as I was going through my Twitter stories last night, and somebody had taken a screenshot of it. And this is from Leighton Woodhouse's Substack. Link down below this article from their Substack. But the title is "Anthony Fauci has been abusing animals for 40 years," and it kind of goes over some really, really disgusting, frankly, animal testing that's been done under Fauci's watch. And again, he's been within these organizations, the NIH, and what is the acronym for the other one? It's in here for 40 plus years, and seems to be a big proponent of animal testing, even though there is very limited evidence, especially at this point in 2021, that animal testing actually translates to any type of scientific research or consensus with regards to how it's going to be affecting people, right? My computer is going slow as fuck. I just tried to share that. Let's try again. My internet is very, very slow today. I don't know why that is, but I need to get that fixed. All right, second try. Did it work? All right, I think it will be showing. There we go. Anthony Fauci has been abusing animals for 40 years. Leighton Woodhouse's Substack. Again, I'll link this down below so you can check it out yourselves. Stuff you've seen on social media barely scratches the surface. The National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the division of the NIH run by Fauci, funded a recent experiment in Tunisia in which lab technicians placed sedated, just how fucked up this is, placed sedated beagles' heads in mesh cages and allowed starved sandflies to feast on them alive. They then repeated the test outdoors with the beagles placed in cages in the desert overnight for 9 consecutive nights in an area of Tunisia where sandflies were abundant, and ZVL, the disease caused by the parasite that the sandfly carries, was endemic. The experiment was just one of countless tests done on animals with the funding of the NIH and then the NIAID again, which Fauci is ahead of, over the course of decades. Estimates of the number of animals experimented on each year in the United States ranges from tens of millions to over 100 million, most of them paid with taxpayer money. The White Coat Waste Project, a nonprofit that advocates against federal animal testing, says that more than 1,100 dogs are experimented on in federal labs annually. For the amount of money and the amount of suffering entailed, little is produced. Much of it is pointless to begin with, but even the experiments that purport to measure safety and efficacy of drugs are all but useless. In NIH's own words, again, this is coming from the government organization that is largely funding all this animal testing-based research. Approximately 30% of promising medications have failed in human clinical trials because they are found to be toxic despite promising preclinical studies in animal models. About 60% of the candidates' drugs failed due to lack of efficacy. It's a 90% failure rate, as Leighton Woodhouse is pointing out. I mean, Jesus Christ. And yet they're continuing to subject these animals, whether it's pigs, dogs, cats, bunnies, to just insane amounts of torture and cruelty that's frankly mind-boggling. And this gets into some of these really disgusting and fucked up practices. Most of that failure is due to the fundamental differences between human physiology and the physiologies of mice, rabbits, or dogs. But even between animals with much closer physiologies, the predictive power of animal tests is unimpressive. Between mice and rats, there's only a 60% chance you'll get the same result. And when you repeat experiments on the same species 4 out of 5 times, is the result the same, and closer to 2 out of 3 times with toxic substances. And yet these tests continue unabated for 3 reasons: institutional inertia, NIH Director Francis Collins, and Anthony Fauci. Saint Fauci, as the liberal hacks in the media like to lionize him as being, right? The Tunisia experiment at least had some practical scientific value. Around 500,000 people a year get ZVL, many of them children. They generally get it from the dogs. get it from dogs. The experiments show that dogs that are infected by the parasite are more attractive to sandflies who carry the virus than unaffected dogs. Same can't be said for other experiments paid for by Fauci's NIA NIAID. Again, he is the head of that organization. If he was against animal testing, vivisection, if he was against this level of cruelty and torture, frankly, the NIAID would have stopped these practices a long time ago, but he's not, so they continue unabated. Last year, the Institute paid the University of Georgia $424,455 to inject beagles with a parasite before killing them and cutting them open. The purpose of the experiment was to test a drug that, by the investigators' own admission, had already been extensively tested and confirmed in numerous other animal species. I mean, the depravity of this is just beyond the pale, just so disgusting. 2019, the NIAID paid $1.68 million to inject and force feed toxic drugs to 44 beagle puppies before killing them and cutting them open. The NIAID paid for the dogs to undergo cordectomy, also known as this part in particular, Jesus Christ, also known as debarking, which is when the dog's vocal cords are severed so that the lab technicians don't have to hear them cry and howl in distress. Purpose of the experiment was to generate data on the drug to support applications to the FDA, even though the FDA expressly does not mandate that human drugs be studied on dogs. So, this is the level of torture and cruelty these beagles are subjected to. So these people performing these really just disgusting procedures didn't have to hear them howl and cry. They literally cut out their fucking vocal cords. I mean, Jesus Christ. Here are some other NIH experiments. Beagles were infected with pneumonia in order to induce septic shock and experimental massive acute hemorrhage, so brain damage, right? Then given blood transfusions. After 96 hours, animals still alive were considered survivors and were euthanized. I mean, just these poor beagles. Beagles are infected with anthrax in order to test a vaccine that was already FDA approved. Mongrel dogs were subjected to an induced heart attack scanned by MRI, then killed and dissected. Pigs, rabbits, guinea pigs, and monkeys were subjected to agonizing pain without anesthesia. These included infecting pigs with the virus that causes acute respiratory stress, hemorrhagic manifestations, paralysis, and other symptoms, injecting rabbits with bacteria that create severe skin infection and ear lesions and usually death within 12 hours, infecting guinea pigs with the virus that causes multi-organ failure and death, as well as hind limb paralysis or prolapse rectum, and infecting monkeys with Ebola and tuberculosis, the latter of which produces symptoms including rapid breathing, weight loss, and inability. Look at this, dude. Monkeys had parts of their brains destroyed with the acid in order to increase their capacity for terror, and they were then tormented with simulated spiders, snakes, and other things they instinctively feared. These experiments have been going on for more than 4 decades. The NIH spends more than $40 billion a year on medical experiments. They're the principal source of funding for basic scientific research in America. The Institute's estimates that 47% of their grants involve animal testing, even though the actual application of animal testing and then transferring that to humans is very, very small, as we saw earlier. It's disgusting. It's likely that the percentage is much higher for the NIAID. Again, that's the organization that Fauci is the head of. The National Institute for Infectious Diseases, what does the A stand for? Commands a budget of $6 billion. There's an unwritten rule: in order to win an NIAID grant, you have to test on animals. Almost all investigators are trained using animal research. Jim Keem, a former USDA veterinarian infectious disease specialist, told me, if you don't use that model, you don't get funding. When a researcher submits an application for an NIH funding, the proposal is reviewed first round by their peers. Almost all of them are animal testers. I mean, just think about just what these animals go through, that whether it's the beagles, the monkeys, the rabbits, the pigs, it just breaks your heart, right? So disgusting. According to Garrett Lavis, a former neuroscientist who used to experiment on mice and who has reviewed NIH grant applications, this professional insularity creates a culture of groupthink. You have institutional inertia because of all these animal experiments. He told me it's simply taken for granted that good research design entails animal experimentation since everyone judging it has been trained that way. Keene, who was the whistleblower in a major NYT expose of animal abuse at the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center in Nebraska, believes another reason for the animal-centric culture at NIH is its leadership, namely Fauci and Collins. People like Fauci and Collins really believe in the animal model, even the evidence is very lacking in that, frankly. It's a huge impact having those two at the helm. The two directors' unquestioning commitment to animal testing sets the tone for the science as a whole. Thanks to them, it's industry standard. Careers are based on it, said Keene. Certainly, Fauci's career is based on it. Fauci has been testing on animals for close to 4 decades and failing to produce results for just as long. In the 80s, he infected chimps with HIV in his quest for a vaccine that still doesn't exist. When that approach failed, he proposed moving on to other animals. Recently, as 2016, he was still touting the likelihood of a new HIV vaccine based on animal studies. After a drug taken for intestinal illness showed promises in suppressing HIV in monkeys, Fauci personally flew to Boston to deliver the good news to the drug makers' executives. 2 years later, it turned out to be another dead. So yes, he definitely seems to have an unquestioning belief in this animal model when there is very little scientific evidence to support that belief, right? The Fauci of the 80s at least had an excuse. Animal models may have been disastrous in terms of their predictive powers for humans, but is arguably the best option scientists had at the time. In 2021, that isn't even remotely true. Again, there's a lot better options that don't involve cruelty and torture to all kinds of different animal species, right? Knowledge in the life sciences double every 7 years. Dr. Thomas Hartung, a toxicologist who directs Johns Hopkins Center for Alternative to Animal Testing, told me we have about 1,000 times more knowledge now than at the time we designed animal tests. Today, scientists can create mini brains to investigate whether and how SARS-CoV-2 affects brain cells. Machine learning software can outperform animal testing in predicting the toxicology of tens of thousands of chemicals in humans. Organs on a chip technology uses tissues derived from stem cells to create simulated organs on a slide the size of a USB stick, which create simulations of the entire human body. In the near future, AI will likely be able to extrapolate from these simulations to model an entire patient population. That technology could supplant the entire animal trial stage of drug development process with results that actually tell you something, as opposed to all of this stuff that Fauci and Collins have this unquestioning, disgusting belief in, right? But calling these alternatives to animal testing is in a sense misleading. Jeremy Beckham, animal rights advocate, that would imply that they were replacing had some utility in the first place. Agreed. These experiments are pretty much all bunk and don't need an alternative per se because they accomplish nothing. Beckham told me it's like asking what's alternative to astrology. Update from the University of Georgia, just trying to defend their bullshit. I mean, Jesus Christ, like, I mean, it was bad enough when, Fauci lied about the mask and kind of lost all, credibility, when he said, no, I was just doing that because we didn't want people to, go out and buy all the masks that the healthcare workers needed. But Jesus Christ, this is pretty disgusting and problematic. He's definitely not Saint Fauci. If anything, we need to have a more nuanced view of Fauci and these, other people, of politicians, public health officials, etc. They're not perfect, and oftentimes they've, committed and done some really horrible things. And I would say this applies to all of the animal testing that he's that head of the organization and they support is really, really disgusting and problematic in my opinion. And there seems to be very little, if any, scientific validity for it, except for that inertia and the people at the head of these organizations, Francis Collins at the NIH and Fauci at the NIAID, are just unquestioning believers in it. But I mean, taking out the vocal cords of those beagles so the testers, these people inflicting massive amounts of pain and torture on these animals, didn't have to hear them howl and cry. I mean, that fucking, it's disgusting. Like the video if you like the damn video, subscribe for more content, all part of the people. Quick shout out to the 2 Uber comrades supporting my channel and this content, Patreon, my partner, and Independent Left News. Peace. Much love.